Where are we going? Welcome to this exclusive podcast produced by Spiritwatch Ministries that will show where life in our darkening times is now turning and how you can avoid the detours of deception through the hope of biblical truth. The Lord Jesus in Matthew 24 warned us over 2 millennia ago and how urgently we need to heed him now. Our host is Pastor Rafael Martinez, a seasoned Northwest Indiana-based minister, intercessor, and counter-cult apologist who will help you discern the journey of change we're all on as the last day of the last days now winds down. For more information, check out our Facebook page and our website at spiritwatch.org. Now, here's Pastor Rafael.
Hello, I'm Rafael Martinez, a minister within the Church of God Cleveland Movement and a director of Spiritwatch Ministries, an outreach providing biblical discernment in a time of deception. Our podcast is called Where Are We Going? And seeks to supply answers to a great question that a lot of people are asking these days about the direction our world is presently taking. Our days are increasingly shadowed by anxiety, violence, deception, and oppression at so many levels. And it's so difficult to really understand where our world is heading. So from one small portion of that, the podcast, Where Are We Going, is something that we're providing that will do all it can to shine light and hope where we possibly can in the area of spiritual discernment. These podcasts will give you a solidly biblical perspective on our deceptive times of trouble. We've been covering cultism, deception, and spiritual abuse issues since we've launched a little over a year ago, and an upcoming podcast will touch on the other deeper issues driving these sadly all too visible signs of even deeper trouble in human society. So we really hope you'll keep joining us for those as well. It's easy to find our podcast on the internet at our spiritwatch.org ministry website or on Facebook using the search term Spiritwatch Ministries. Links to them will be on our homepage and our Facebook page, as well as our blog, the Spiritwatch Unchained blogspot link. We'll post them all there for easy access with a couple of mouse clicks. So just bookmark us. Share the links with friends, family, your tax collectors, your teachers, your mechanics. Help us build our audience if we can. We're now currently being carried by both Amazon and Spotify as well. So we are so grateful to have folks coming from there, and we thank you for visiting us today. We hope that you'll find something worthy to listening and to bookmark us and come back again.
We're pressing on with our ministry of discernment that focuses on the Xenos dwell movement that we've been talking about for some time here on the podcast. It's based in Columbus, Ohio. It's one of the most I think probably one of the most pernicious cults that you've probably never heard of. And we're hoping that as time goes by that you'll see why. If you still have not quite gotten down to the bottom of it, we think that our podcasts have tried our very best to provide balanced and sound information on that. So, and that stems from the work we were doing on me and Megan Cox from the Beyond Zion Foundation. We were doing work on a yet to be released documentary on Xenos last December, and that's going to be documenting the daily abuses and spiritual outrages that the movement has perpetuated for over 50 years there among untold thousands of idealistic young men and women who got involved in Xenos, got attracted to it after being recruited. They got involved with it as part of their own personal noble search for understanding and meaning and connection with God, and that's certainly nothing wrong with that. I think it's certainly a very laudable thing, but as they sought this connection with God, this kingdom, they only found themselves becoming slaves to an organization that's built by men to perpetuate their own little kingdoms. And the sad thing is they truly believe they're doing God's work in that effort. And it's really, just quite the opposites. So today's guest, is Steve Cardoza, who was an actual former leader in Xenos/Dwell, who emailed us a while back and who we're delighted to invite to our virtual studio here. We're hoping, that you're going to find his insights and sharing to be most informative as and I've really enjoyed visiting with him as well. So thanks for coming, Steve. Thanks for coming on the podcast today.
All right, Raphael, thanks for having me. Yeah.
Okay, great. So tell us a little more about who you are and what you're doing and why you're doing this.
Yeah, my name is Steve Cardoza, and like you said, I was a leader in Xenos for, probably about 17 or 18 years. I was a member of the college ministry in the 90s, the adult ministry throughout the 2000s and 20-teens. Ended up leaving in 2018. The reason the reason I reached out to you actually was one of your podcasts a few weeks ago. I was listening to your podcast a few weeks ago, and you were talking to a woman who was kicked out for sexual sin. And as I was listening to your podcast, it just brought back a flood of memories. And then my wife and I both, independently had we both said, wow, we really have to reach out to Raphael and give him some background.
Well, I'm glad you did. So I appreciate you doing that because, like I said, you shared a great insight into that dimension of things in Xenos that we definitely want to get into. But first of all, before we discuss that, how did you get involved in Xenos? What was your own, and I hate to use the term, but it speaks, what was your own career path there? How did you come to be a leader? I mean, everyone there is supposed to become leaders in some manner. So how did you end up going the direction you did there at Xenos?
All right. Well, I'll just give a little bit of background on myself. So, prior to joining to Xenos, I was raised in the Catholic Church. When I was going through the confirmation process in the Catholic Church, we had to read some scriptures, and I was meeting with the priest. I was talking about the scriptures, and God just spoke to me through his word. So I remember reading the word and thinking to myself, if this is true, then this changes everything in my life. If these claims in the Bible are true, then this has to change how I live my life. And I remember talking to the priest about that, and we had a great discussion about it. He was really excited. Fast forward, 4 more years. I graduated high school. I started going to Ohio State. I had a friend from high school who invited me to check out her Bible study, and I still had that hunger for God. And I was like, sure, I'll come check out your Bible study. So I ended up, it ended up being Xenos. So I joined Xenos in the college ministry. The college ministry at that time in 1994 was pretty small. There was maybe 50, 60 people in it. Mm-hmm. Later on the next year in 1995, I ended up moving into a ministry house and, living with other Christians. I think, we had one summer we had 20 guys in our house, in a 4-bedroom house.
Summer day.
Yeah, 2 bedrooms, I'll tell you. It was really overcrowded. Yeah. But once I got into the house, and this, when you join the church initially, right? There's not so many meetings. You're maybe going to home church, and then they'll invite you to central teaching or vice versa. But pretty soon you're involved in those two main meetings, and they're weekly meetings. And then someone will start discipling you. Meaning they'll meet with you one-on-one to start studying the Bible and getting to know you. And then from there you get invited, and this is the path that I took, and this is the path that most people take. After you've been discipling with someone for a little bit, they'll invite you into the men's and women's study groups, which they also call cell groups. That's again another meeting on a Friday night. And these meetings are, the time commitment is usually there's about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour teaching or lecture at these meetings, and then you're also expected to stick around for a few hours of fellowship. So they end up being like 3 or 4 hour blocks. So you've got a 3-hour block on Monday, 3-hour block on Thursday, for home church and CT. Then you've got a 3-hour block on Friday for your cell group. You're meeting with your discipler on Tuesday nights, and then after you've been around for a while, the first thing they try to do is to get you to reach out to as many friends and family members as you possibly can. You want to try to bring them in, because when you first join and you're excited about what you're learning, you're excited about your relationship with God, is when that's the best time to start doing evangelism, getting people excited around you. So they're working with you to strategize on how to bring your friends out to meetings, how to bring your family out to meetings, how to get them involved. And if they're not receptive, then you're encouraged not to spend any time with them. They won't tell you not to spend time with them, but they'll teach you to be strategic about it. They use the word strategy a lot. You want to be strategic in how you think through your relationships. So if someone's not being receptive to coming to meetings or to the gospel, then you don't want to waste your time on that person. You want to move on to someone else who's receptive.
Interesting.
So,
meetings and gospel. That suddenly the gospel becomes the meetings, right?
It does. It really does. And what happens, Xenos has a lot of, for decades, they've gotten feedback that they or accusations that they separate people from families, right? And so Xenos vehemently denies we never teach that. We teach the opposite, that you should be involved with your families. But the culture that they have inside Xenos, as I was just describing, when you have your nights fill up, and then on Wednesdays they'll throw classes, and that's another 3-hour block of time. So especially in the student ministries, right? You very easily have every night of the week is completely booked, and your weekends, there's evangelism events, there's house events that you're not really able to skip, because they'll say that you're not required to go, but at the same time, there will be people challenging you if you miss any single meeting, right?
Right.
So there was a woman I was in a home church with, and she's very high up in the church. She's what they call a division coordinator. So that's kind of a home church overseer. It's just below elder, but higher than a normal home church leader. And her favorite saying was, you make time for what's important to you. So if you're choosing not to come to a meeting, that's because it's not important to you, which is just such a black and white way of looking at the world, right? So it's a hard issue between you and God if you miss any of these meetings, and that can prevent you from being able to do things in the church, like teaching or leading or engaging in different ministries. There's different gates you have to pass through of commitment. So then they'll hold you back. So you really have to be very committed. And so what happens is that people get sucked in entirely into the church. So that they really aren't spending time with their old friends that are outside of the church unless they can get them into the church. They're not spending time with their family as much anymore. They're rarely seeing them. And that's because there's so much pressure to attend everything, and there's meetings that are happening all the time. So when the elders and the leaders are saying, oh, we don't teach this, you may not teach it, but you developed a culture that results in that. So you're complicit. So.
Yeah, exactly. So it starts with pretty much everyone joining, being treated as this potential leader. They're being groomed for it. They're creating this, they create this irresistible and spiritually romantic draw to be this cutting edge world changer, taking the cities for God. Everyone in Xenos is compelled to be upwardly mobile as a sign of spiritual growth, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So part of that draw is a powerful mandate for everyone to submit to leaders unreservedly, as to defer to their admonition and to confess freely whatever sin or secret or personal thought that you might require to make a spiritual ruling of their behavior. I mean, if you're a leader, that's what you're expected to do. So along the way, as you developed, as you become more of a leader, that was certainly what became loud and clear part of the marching orders for elders, right?
Right. Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So part of that then is something that you had to, wield quite often. I'm sure as you were now before you became a full-blown leader, did you see, I'm certain you saw, I don't know if I've even asked that question. I'm certain you saw examples in which that took place. At that point, when you began seeing people being called out for sins and failings, at what point did you see any of that as maybe being overlap or inappropriate?
Right. I think that, the first inkling that I had is, I was in my ministry house, and I was still kind of a new Christian, and I had a friend over. A girl was over. We were watching a movie together. I had my arm around her, and then, somebody said, "Hey, can you come here and talk to me for a second?" And they're like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "What do you mean? What am I doing?" And I was like, "We're just watching a movie." And they're like, "Whoa, but you shouldn't be doing that." And I was like, "Okay, this is really weird." And so that kind of, at first I was like, "Huh, you're a college kid. It's just unexpected." And so the more after that time, I started talking to people, and over time, there's this culture that's underneath it, where people's lives are micromanaged, right? And when people cross certain lines, there is discipline that occurs. So you did start to see that. You started to see discipline, where people would start being treated differently, after they confessed certain things and, viewed different ways, and they really couldn't change that. And it always eventually leads to excommunication.
Yeah, right. So, I would take it that at some point, were you involved in situations, circles in which you had to exercise, be part of that chain of authority?
Yeah, I did. So, I was in a group where, there was a guy I excommunicated out, and it's probably my worst memory of, being a Xenos, because, at the time I was convinced that it was the right thing to do, even though, internally, my heart was yelling at me like this is the wrong choice. But what happens is, and this is why I reached out to you in the first place, is as a leader, your goal is to grow your home church, right? They told us when I first became a leader, they sat down with us and were asking us, what do you think your goal is as a leader? And some people were like, well, to help people, know Christ. And they're like, actually, that's a part of it, but that's not the real goal. The real goal is for you to plant home churches.
Wow.
Is to replicate home churches. And to replicate home churches, you need to do two things. You need to double the size of your group. You need to do a lot of evangelism. You're starting out with about 20 people in a home church. You need to double the size of it, and you need to double your leadership team. So you need to there's usually 4 leaders in a home church. You need to get that up to 8, so you have another leadership team to plant with that new home church. What happens is in the college ministry, we used to have these leader summits where all the college leaders, where the elders would gather the college leaders for a weekend away, and one of the things they would do at those retreats is they would have a big graph on the screen, and on one axis was numerical growth, so number of people you're bringing into the group, and the other axis was they labeled it qualitative growth. So this is the number of people in your home church that are taking classes or things like that. So are they learning? Are they progressing down that leadership track? And are you growing numerically? And then they would use, because we have to, as a leader, you're submitting statistics to the elders constantly. Who's coming to meetings, who's taking classes, who's being discipled, who's discipling other people, who's bringing people to the group. You're delivering those statistics weekly to the elders. If you miss a week, you hear about it. They yell at you about it. So they ingest those stats constantly. And so they were put each home church on this chart. And if you weren't in the high growth and high quality quadrant, then if you were in a different quadrant, then you had some problems. And they would brainstorm about what those problems were. They'd ask you, do you need to raise the tension on people to bring more people out to the group? Do you need to raise the tension on people's lives to take more classes? And if you're like, well, we're doing everything we can and nothing seems to be changing, then the answer was, well, there's probably some sin in your group. And so what would happen is, they were really adamant that you need to root out the sin in your group. And they particularly always zeroed in on sexual sin. So if anybody's having sex, and they defined sexual sin as anybody who's having sex, right? So they use the passages in 1 Corinthians that talk about the guy who was having sex with his mom, and the church was celebrating that as the justification for disciplining anyone in the group who's having sex, no matter if it's in a committed dating relationship or something like that. There's different. I feel like there's a difference between teaching about the biblical view of sexuality and disciplining everyone for consensual adults. It's I think there's a difference there that they don't capture. But my point is they make a direct connection between sexual activity in your home group and in your Bible study and growth. And since growth is the goal, those sexual activities are preventing God from using your group. So you need to take action and discipline the person involved in that. And if they don't repent, if you confront them and they don't repent, it's really a 3-strike system. So you go to them individually and ask, and say, hey, you need to repent. And more than repenting, they need to stop doing it. So it's either like breaking up with their partner or or some other way to prove that they're not doing it anymore. And then if that doesn't happen, then you take one other brother or sister with you and you confront them. And if that doesn't change, then you would actually bring them in front of the actual church. You would sit them down in front of, you'd get all, 30, 40 people in your home church together. You bring this person in and you would tell the entire church what they were doing and all the gory details of it.
Yeah.
And then everybody's pleading with them like, oh, please change your mind. Please, don't do this. So already this is, you've crossed a line and just embarrassing these people entirely before the church, airing all of their dirty laundry to everybody. And it was always this very emotional thing. So, the way that the elders spun this to us as leaders was that, when you do this, what you'll see happen is that people will recommit to Christ. And that we usually see that the home church comes together after we do this discipline. The growth takes off exponentially again.
And the end justifies the means, right?
The end justifies the means. It becomes a good thing. And the person kicked out, they're never heard from again, right? You're supposed to not talk to them or engage with them unless it's about their sin. And because of the way that the church is structured and how busy you are, you don't have time for anybody who's not at those meetings with you, who's not a priority, who you're not being strategic with. So when people leave or get disciplined out, it really is a shunning. You don't see them anymore. And then they feel very, very alone and trapped.
Yeah, that would warm the heart of any Jehovah's Witness elder or any other cultic authority leader that does exactly the same thing, because shunning is to me the most evil sign of how damaging a group can be. And it seems like Xenos has developed this into a fine art. It's not a matter of shooting the wounded; it is just pushing them off the ambulance and just leaving them to crash out in a ditch somewhere, forgotten. Because that's basically what happens. It's death by attrition. It's not discipline. It's just complete death. It's not even redemptive. It's just to absolutely crush someone down.
One of the things that happened is when I left the church in 2018. Again, it was, you're very alone when you leave, but people started talking, and right around that time is when people started connecting online about it. And I think it started with one guy who was a friend of mine. I forget if it was in Reddit or somewhere else, but he posted his name, his full name, and said, I left, and then this is why, and this place is a cult. And then I reached out to him online, and he was really scared because he thought I was still involved in a leader and stuff, and he didn't want to open it, but then he opened it up, and and we ended up connecting online, and then more and more people started talking, and the stories are just heartbreaking because, and the one I think that stuck out to me, there was one girl who I knew in college group that had been kicked out, and she commented on how for years and years, how she felt completely alone and rejected by God. And I thought, there's nothing less redemptive or more unspiritual of an outcome that you could ever hope for from this activity than that. And it broke my heart and it made me mad.
Yeah.
Because people, this is blaspheming God's name to people.
Right.
And it just made me really sad. It just did.
Because in the end, it's that ambition, the loyalty, and submission to the authority of the group that's the mark of approval to Xenos. It's what you do for them. It's not the reflection of the character of Jesus Christ in love, grace, and humility. It's just being part of a cog, a very sharp, well-defined, high-spinning, high-output cog in the works to keep it rolling, to keep it moving at some level. That becomes really the issue. That is very much an indignant thing to hear, and it's one of the reasons, like I said, I'm involved with this. As a Christian minister, as one devoted to preaching the gospel and helping make disciples of Christ, I see this as probably one of the most ugliest forms of repression of the human spirit I've ever seen. Remnant Fellowship, and I've been battling them for 20 years. Remnant Fellowship is just as evil, but they're almost pikers compared to what Xenos is doing. Xenos has created this highly tuned and very effective machine of control that beggars description. I have rarely seen cults that much more damaging than Xenos. I mean, there are other cultic movements on campuses like the International Churches of Christ and Eastern Lightning and the Unification movement. Certainly was in its day just as bad, but they had multiple audiences they pulled through. I mean, Xenos is completely focused upon the idealism and the good graces of young people who are at that point in their lives, 19, 20, 21. They're the most open to changing their lives, to submitting. And I'm sure you saw as a leader over and over instances in which people just unreservedly gave their hearts to the organization and found that that's what they were doing. They were giving it to a machine and not to God.
Right. Yeah. We were trusting these people who were, much older, much more mature, than us. They micromanage people's lives. When I was in college, Dennis, I was in the 90s, we're Gen X. Dennis used to do these exhortors where he'd take people out to other promising leaders in the college ministry. They'd go and visit other churches around the country, places like Calvary or Mars Hill, places like that. They would interview people there and then come back and present their findings to they'd call it a workers meeting. It was people who were involved in the cell groups. They would get them all together in the college ministry and they'd tell us their findings from the trips. And then the findings were always the same, is that no one is doing anything close to the level of ministry and commitment that Xenos has. That Xenos, and Dennis literally said that Xenos is maybe the only real church in America and possibly even the world at that meeting. And, every night there were teachings. It was always focused on the numbers, on our outreach and bringing people in. It was, one of his favorite teachings was, imagine you're at this party and everybody's, got a terminal illness, but you have the cure. You're the only one with the cure. What's the loving thing to do is to just spend your entire life, give everything you have to save as many people as you can. And so it was just this unbelievable amount of pressure to devote your entire life to this cause, and how they manipulated you. I mean, there's one of the papers I think that gets talked about a lot, is Propositions on Christ Community, or what is it? Propositions on Christ Culture and Career. It's just a career paper that was popular at the time. And it's basically like, you need to, it tells people that you need to stay in Columbus. And this was popular when our high school students were checking out the college ministry before they were going to join. They would have teachings about this. And it's basically saying that, going away out of Columbus for college is a sin. You might not even be a believer if you would want to leave Columbus, if you would want to leave Xenos. God planted you here sovereignly. It's your duty to give your life to this. And so there's many, many people I knew that turned down scholarships, career opportunities to stay in the college ministry and sell their lives out. People who dropped out of college in order to do this work, this ministry. And then when they get older and they're in middle age and they're struggling with their careers, the church isn't there to help them anymore. And a lot of times they kick them out anyway. So people who have sacrificed so much for the church, there's no reciprocal commitment to those people.
Right.
It's really sad,
Right. Right. It's ultimately that's again how things work in cults. I mean, you're only as good in the cult as you are useful and productive. I mean, there's a myth about people when that's. I have an actual article on the website about that where I talk about the popular myths about cults, and one of those is that cults only go after the fearful, the weak, the feeble-minded, people who are ignorant. That's so completely wrong. Cults target the sharpest, most sensitive, most intellectual, most energetic individuals of society, because that's who they want energizing their structure, their system. And I'm sure as a leader going to all these institutes, that's something you kept hearing, right? You kept hearing that we need to keep people working, need to keep people busy. I think we mentioned, and I've heard this mentioned by others, is that one of the things that was used popularly as an illustration about the growth of Xenos is that what you really want to see the churches do is replicate like a cancer, like a virus.
Mm-hmm. And, that was the teaching. It was like bacteria. If every person brought out just 2 people a year, and then those people each brought out 2, after 10 years, everybody in Ohio would be in Xenos or something like that. And then the next year, half of the East Coast. And that was the model that they were pushing constantly. And it's, it's like an Amway movement or like a pyramid scheme, that's kind of where it's that kind of business philosophy, right? Where if you just get 2 people and they get 2 people and,
Yeah. And that's, and you think, well, if you're going to draw from what the Bible is, what a novel concept, draw from what the Bible says about church, about true Christian growth, you would look at the book of Acts and see how it actually happened. But it seems that, and as I was sharing with Katie last week, part of the things that we talked about, Katie Renneker, one of the things that we talked about is the fact that the whole culture underlying Xenos is more that of let's say that you've already mentioned, an organization, a corporate organization built on marketing itself relentlessly to a single focused demographic in such a way that everyone is called on to give ultimate sacrifices. And then when you're no longer useful, you're let out you're not let out the pasture, you're just cut off.
Right. Yep. It's either 100% or nothing. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, right. I remember the story. I remember the scene in Animal Farm. I don't know if you remember reading the book Animal Farm by George Orwell, in which there's the great, hardworking draft horse boxer who just absolutely slaves away. He gives himself to the cause of building up the colony of animals who've taken over a farm from an evil farmer and are creating their own little society. And increasingly, the leadership is demanding more and more of all the animals. The leadership are the pigs, of course, and pigs become the leaders because they supposedly have the sharpest sticks in the woods there. And Boxer just becomes totally dominated by and enchanted by their continual cries for sacrifice, and he gives himself unceasingly to help build a windmill by dragging rocks that the animals cut out from a quarry, and he finally gets injured. His strength gives out, and in the end, they've all been reminded by the pig leadership, hey, we're going to take care of you. You're going to go out to pasture. You'll be taken care of. You can eat. You can rest. In the end, they find that that poor Boxer is packed away in a wagon with a bunch of men taking him off to the glue factory. Mm-hmm. So it's a very 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 sterile kind of business that authoritarianism will do to eliminate those who are no longer useful, and that sounds exactly what Xenos does. By using all this paperwork, all these different things that it uses to assess people, that's how the organization focuses on who's the weak, who are those who do not deserve to be among us anymore. And that's stemming to another bit of cult mind control. One of the 8 principles of cult mind control that Dr. Robert J. Lifton posited was that ultimately one of the things that you would see in that is one principle called the doctrine, the belief of doctrine over person. Your experience and who you are. I mean, not doctrine of person. I mean, let me repeat this. My manipulation. What is it? It's doctrine of person. It's the dispensing of existence. Okay. The dispensing of existence is the principle of the dispensing of existence is one of 8 mind control concepts that Dr. Robert J. Lifton posited about how cults and how totalism change minds and practice thought reform. What we call cult mind control. And the dispensing of existence means that a group has assumed to itself the divine right and the authority to determine whether or not a person is allowed to exist or even be allowed to be acknowledged as existing in a group. In other words, they can tell you whether you're sliced butter or whether you're just dirt. Right. And that's exactly how what I see Xenos doing every day, every single day, and that was part of how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So as part of that process, and I know these are not easy things to talk about, I understand, but as part of that process, as part of the group of people who were called upon to exercise discipline as necessary, I understand you weren't alone in having to make these tough decisions. There were other people that had to abide by them and exercise authority that they were given up to or given to exercise. What were some of the other? Can you recall moments in which you met with other leaders talking about this very thing, and you found them hesitating or having the same crisis of conscience that you had in terms of actually exercising discipline? Were there other leaders that actually felt the same way you did?
Yeah, I would say, the last home church I was involved in before I left, there was a guy I was studying with who had been in the college group when I was, and I would talk to him about my misgivings about this quite a bit, and he agreed with me on most of it, right? I mean, we would talk, he was in agreement about it. He'd nod his head and be like, yeah, I see that too. But what it comes down to is, usually what you would hear back from other leaders when you talk to it is like, well, no church is perfect. We all make mistakes, and where else are you going to go? Every church is going to have issues. And so it's really, people see it, but no one really, I guess feels they're empowered to change it, and just accept it because, the good outweighs the bad, I think is how most people would see it.
Yeah. The church is growing. People are pure, so-called. The attendance is up. Numbers are up. More butts in the seats. I mean, that's what it is.
And that's
right?
part of the problem too. Is they directly also equate growth with God's hand on somebody's ministry, or lack of growth with God removing their hand. So, that's where they get the if your group's not growing, then it's indicative of there's some sin or rebellion in that group, because God's not blessing you with growth. And groups that are growing are like, well, they're doing whatever they're doing is right because God's blessing them with growth. And that's not the case. Sometimes you just have some charismatic person that's leading that group, and that doesn't mean anything about God's hand on it. I mean, they can be, just bringing people out because they've got a great personality, they're very charming, and good teacher or something like that. But that would be interpreted inside the group as someone who's God's got their hand on, and they get a lot of attention because, they're getting butts in seats and growing the group.
Right, exactly. And the thing is that when it comes down to that, to making sure there's no sin in the camp, this fascination with sexuality just seems to be, I guess, the most well-known aspect of Xenos' abusive discipleship. But they seem to ignore probably the more common things, such as, personal character, whether people lie, whether people steal, whether people are actually forgiving and not having nasty tempers. It seems like those sort of things are tolerated and nowhere near as discussed in that level than sex. Those are the heart character issues that any concerned Christian would certainly want to take heed to as part of wanting to look more like Jesus, to be a disciple and a follower of his, to be a light in the world. You need to be in the light. But sex always seems to be the one thing that seems to hold down the most priority in discipling. I mean, I understand what you mentioned about that, but have you ever seen any kind of zeal on other kinds of ways, or is sex really the only thing that really matters to purity when it comes about talking about that?
Sex is definitely the biggest one. It's definitely the most common one that you hear about. I think all of I think every home church I was in, there's probably 7 or 8 different home churches over the course of my time there. I think every home church excommunicated someone, at least one person, for sex in that time. There are other sins that they will excommunicate for. I haven't personally been witness to it, but I have heard that there are some other ones. I think, if someone was abusive, like physically abusive or something like that, they might do an excommunication for that. But even then, like I said, there's none that I personally am aware of.
Okay.
It may have happened, but the sexual ones, it's a dime a dozen, and it's in every group that you're a part of. And part of the thing is, our leaders meetings were, as leaders, there's usually 4 leaders in a group. We met every week or two, and would just discuss everybody. We'd get out our we have a ministry chart, of all the people in the group and who's doing what with who. And, all the information on what's going on in your home church, who's talking to who about what, what's going on in all their lives, that all gets filtered up to you as a leader. And we're discussing those things in our leaders meetings and trying to come up with plans from what we know to create tension in people's lives, to push them forward. Or if we find out that there's a sin, then we need to step in. But there's so much micromanagement that happens in those meetings. Right. And you're taught that it's for their good. This is what you're supposed to do as a Christian, but man, you're removing, I didn't realize this till I was much older, but you're really removing the Holy Spirit from the equation, or what God's doing in people's lives. We have a home church overseer that would come meet with you. This is someone who's above a home church leader, below an elder. They would come and talk to you about what's going on in your group, and they would have the stats. And, I've met with these people for years and years and years. And the one thing they never asked me in all those years, not a single one ever asked me, what's God doing with the people in your group?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because that's not important. It's what, how many people are in classes? Who's bringing out people? How can you get more evangelism going? How can you get more discipleship?
And all nicely documented and everything, right?
Oh, God, the database is huge. They keep so much information on people. That's one of the reasons I got upset too. Is I'm not sure if it was your interview or one of the NBC4 stories or something, but the elders tried to say that they don't know who lives in the ministry houses, and
that was our talk.
Such a lie.
Yeah, we were talking to Conrad and Kate about that, and like you said, they just flat out denied it.
And to me, it's just that really was so disappointing for me to hear from elders, because I submitted those statistics. I know that they know who lives in the ministry houses. We would talk to our overseers about who was living in the houses and who could move in and who couldn't. They have a database with everybody's addresses in them. If they're living in the same house, they know who's living in that house. So it's just it's so sad to see the lying. If you're lying to protect an organization, right? And that's part of my frustration is lying to protect the organization means that, the organization is more important than the people. That you've placed this organization at a much higher level than the people who are being hurt here.
Right.
So.
Exactly. And then when you step in to actually become the Holy Spirit and do His work of convicting and reproving, and when you start stepping in and assuming that burden for yourself, wow. That just speaks to me. That to me is the greatest argument that I've put forth in my articles and in my discussion about Xenos over the past few months, is that what Xenos is really doing. They've created another gospel that's alien to the biblical good news. In 2 Corinthians 11:4, Paul the apostle bemoans the Corinthian church for their being so easily seduced by religious authority figures who preached what he called another gospel by the power of another spirit to proclaim a deity that they called another Jesus. And that's exactly what Xenos is doing. As I wrote to you, I said that, the majesty and all sufficiency we should regard God with is completely lost in Xenos. They lose the tree on Golgotha by wandering in their own forest of busy work that's created more for titillating, self-aggrandizing than authentic Christian formation. And as a pastor, devoted to Christian discipleship, that enrages me. That infuriates me. Because what they're doing, close relationships, where community is intentional, where people are meeting regularly, that's not the problem. that certainly is a wonderful way of organizing and certainly bringing people into authentic community. But it's what you do in those meetings and how much importance you hang on them that turns it into a religious machine, not Christian community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree completely.
I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road. So at what point, while you're involved in all this, at what point did you finally start realizing, look, stuff isn't adding up here? And how much of that dissonance, that that cognitive dissonance, that struggle to reconcile two irreconcilable truths, your conscience between what the organization wanted, how much of that went on in your head, and what was it that began leading you to understanding and realizing, look, this place isn't where I should be. This is something I need to get out of.
Well, unfortunately, I'm a very stubborn and committed person, so it took me a very long time to get to that point.
Right.
But the first thing that happened is when I was in the college ministry, there was a point where I had a complete panic attack, basically a nervous breakdown. At that point, I'm teaching every week. I'm going to school full time. I'm working 30 hours a week, and I'm going to 5 meetings a week on the weekends. So, it was a pressure cooker. And eventually I remember I was walking on campus and I felt like I was having a heart attack. And, I'm in my early 20s at this point. And the 2 kids had to carry me into the med center. And they said, "You're having a panic attack." And I thought I was dying. But it was then that I started to realize I'm doing way too much. Like, I can't do this. I can't keep up with this pressure. So I started to take some steps back a little bit and to try and not do quite so much. If I was smart, I would have put more together about that. But instead, I kept at it. We kept working at things. Our home church wasn't growing so fast in the college ministry. We were getting older. We had a kid, and I had always had misgivings, like, about that discipline when we kicked that guy out of my group. It didn't sit well with me. I didn't have the experience that they said I should have, where it should bring the group together. It should bring peace to the group and growth. It didn't. That's not how it went. It felt horrible, and I felt sad on the inside. And my group, it didn't motivate anybody. Eventually, they asked us to leave the college. They disbanded our home group, and at that point, my wife and I were talking. We almost left Xenos at that point, but we thought we would go to a different side of the church and see what things were like. We were always on Dennis's side of the church, and we'd heard good things about Gary's side. So when we went to the adult group, we went to Gary's side. And typical, like Xenos, so if you're gone, you're gone. When we left the college ministry after serving there for 10 or 12 years, didn't even get a thank you or anything like that. The next day, they took us off all the email groups and said, just go up to the visitor center, like it's your first time at the church, and we'll try and find you a place. So we ended up joining Gary's group, and for a little while it was pretty good. But then over time, I started to see that the same things that I saw in the college ministry on Dennis's side were still there on the adult side over with Gary. There's this micromanaging of people's lives that occurs in the leaders' meetings. People have come, I'm sure you've heard stories where people complain about being told who they can and cannot date. Right. For example, there's that level of control. Well, I saw that in the adult ministry too. I mean, there was a guy in our group who was divorced, and we're at the leaders meeting, and one of the leaders in the group said, "Hey, I don't think this guy's ready to date, but he's hanging out with this girl in this other group. So I'm going to go talk to the leaders over there and let them know that he's not ready so they can talk to her so that they won't get together." And they did. And no one is aware that these conversations are happening in the background. So this guy's probably gone on a few dates, and then all of a sudden this girl won't talk to him anymore, and he's probably wondering why. And it's because the leaders, went to the other home group and had a chat, right?
Yeah.
So just micromanaging, controlling all these little details. It was terrible. And so finally so my wife and I were trying to make it work. We're trying to continue to serve, and to stay involved. And finally it just got to we're raising our kids. My kid's in junior high group. This was the kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for me. So my son was in the junior high ministry, and I was doing the junior high ministry with him. So that means, we have a 15-minute Bible study with a bunch of middle school boys, and we're going out, and it's just me and a couple other dads. We're playing sports for a couple hours, doing some scavenger hunts. It's a lot of fun. Something we really enjoy doing together.
Right.
But at the same time, in my adult group, I had stopped going to my men's Bible study. And I had stopped going to that men's Bible study for a couple reasons. Primarily, the reason was I was really busy. I was leading my other younger son's scout group, working on weekends at the time quite a bit. Didn't have time for it. And it was a meeting where, one of the things that happens when you're planting groups so frequently like they do in Xenos is that over time, you start to not have real relationships in those groups because you can't reinvent deep relationships every 2 years with brand new people. And so over time, you end up in groups where, there's not a good depth of relating in those groups. It's sort of like any other group in the world, like, your kid's soccer team or something. You're friends with the parents, but then, when the season's over, you don't see them as much. It's sort of like that. Over time in Xenos, but they're telling you it's these amazing relationships, but the reality is they're not that great.
They're superficial.
But so I stopped going to this men's group, and what happened was at first, they started talking to me a little bit about it, like, hey, why aren't you coming? And I told them why I wasn't coming, because the content of that meeting, I wasn't getting anything out of it, and I wasn't contributing anything to it. And with my time crunch, I just couldn't do it anymore. And I thought, I'm going to take some ownership of my life and not go to this anymore. There's no point. I'm too busy. And then they eventually came to me and said, all right, so we've talked it over with the elders, and you can't do this junior high group with your kid anymore. And I said, well, why not? And they said, well, because you're not committed, God can't speak through you anymore. That was what they told me. So because I'm still going to 2 meetings a week. I'm going to home church. I'm going to essential teaching. I just stopped going to my men's group. Now that means that God can't speak through me anymore. I'm lukewarm. Not a good example, not a good witness. And I have to go tell my son that I can't do this meeting with him anymore that he loves. I sit my son down. I explain to him that I can't do this Bible study anymore with him, and he starts crying, right? And I think that's when something finally woke up in me, like this church that I've given, the past 24 years of my life to, like literally every night of the week for like 24 years. I don't even know how many thousands of dollars, is going to have me treat my son like this, is doing this to my family when I'm giving them still like 80%, not 100%. Like this is crazy. This is abusive. And I never went back after that. I said, enough. I'm done. And that's when I left. And that's really what it is. It's exactly right. When you're saying like you're just a cog in the wheel, you're important to them when you're producing something, but the minute you don't produce 100%, everyone's disposable. Every single person's disposable.
Yeah.
So whether they're kicking people out or people aren't producing enough, they just get tossed aside. So
that was in 2018. That's when that epiphany finally came to you. Wow.
Yeah. And then, since then it's been a lot of reflecting on the past, and realizing all these layers of abuse and manipulation that have gone on, and you don't see it. I mean, I feel bad for the people involved, because when I was involved, you don't see it. Everything's explained away and it's super spiritualized, right? But when you actually stop to look back on what's happening and how people are being treated, you're like, well, wait a minute, this isn't right. This isn't biblical at all. This isn't Jesus who left the 99 for the one. This is,
right. Exactly.
This is something seriously wrong here,
Yeah, exactly. And at that point, there was how that impact your family. I mean, how are you guys doing with it all now? I mean, to be involved to that degree for so long. I mean, how it affect you guys? How are you guys doing with it now?
The first year was really hard because when I left, my wife was still involved and she wasn't ready to leave. So she probably stayed on for about another year. My son really liked his high school group a lot and wanted to continue that. He continued that through he had one more year left in it, so I let him finish that out. And then my wife and I, we had a lot of discussions for about a year about it. And then she also decided to leave.
Okay.
And my son decided to leave, and my children have gotten involved with Young Life, and they both are having great experiences there. My wife and I, we've checked out some other churches. We've gotten involved a little bit here and there. She's more involved than I am. I feel like I'm still processing a lot of this past, and it's hard for me. I'll be honest with you. It's really hard for me to jump in and get involved in another group right now because of this background. So I've been struggling with that. I love God. I love the gospel. I love grace. And I've been trying to help people recover from Xenos. There's been a huge outpouring of people discussing these things. There's been some support groups online that have sprung up, and I've tried to help out on those groups to just offer explanations from the leader side of things, to be supportive of people, to listen. Just a lot of it's just listening to people and validating them, because when people leave, no one ever follows up with them, and they usually a lot of times are just on their own and alone. They've been sucked into this community and are just completely cut off from it with nothing, and they just need to talk. They need to process it, get it out, and so trying to do that.
Right. Well, I'm certainly glad to hear that you're on that process, because so many people never get there. So many people never get to that point where they realize that they need help and that it wasn't their fault. They were put into a situation where they became trapped. They became slaves. They became completely bound by an evil, rigid system of abuse that completely controlled them, overwhelmed them. I mean, one of the sad things I hear from people, and one of the things I know that Katie and I and others have spoken with, is that people who find themselves, whether they walk out or whether they're kicked out, they find themselves so full of guilt, so full of pain, so full of self-incrimination that they didn't measure up to the standards of the organization. First of all, if they can get beyond that hurdle, then they began feeling guilty and stupid. They began, how could I be so dumb? How could I be so completely spiritually inept to get involved? Well, that's not the point. That's something that I tell a lot of people struggling with that, is that, listen, you didn't go into this stupid. You didn't go into this blind. You went into this with a good heart, with a mind and a spirit that were set up to serve people. You had the right reasons for being there. You didn't count that people were going to lie to you and turn you into a slave and turn you into something that basically was just like I said, a drone. You became an object. You became, like you said, only functional, only valuable when you're functional. You didn't count on people treating you that way, but that's what happened. So that's the reason why, feeling bad about, feeling guilty should never be in the mind, because you didn't know. You didn't know what they were going to do. Nobody does. As they say, nobody joins a cult. They join a movement that's going to enrich themselves, change the world, bring them closer to God. They didn't go to become part of an evil system. They didn't. So no,
not at all. Yeah,
and I'm glad you're there. I'm glad you're able to share people that way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So, well, I really appreciate you sharing us, and we intend to have you back to share a little more in the future. I appreciate you taking the time now. But as we close here, Steve, looking back at where you've been and the people that you've been forced to basically leave behind because they all shunned you. Is there something perhaps that maybe you'd like to say, maybe perhaps to those fellow leaders, to those who you once discipled? Is there something you'd like to say to either populace or other, or something you'd just like to maybe share with them that maybe is your insight, and maybe you'd like to leave a message perhaps to those who may be listening And by the way, you're all welcome. I'm glad you keep coming back and listening because I know you're there. So is there something you'd like to share? And I want to give you the floor for just a few more minutes to kind of have a chance to share that.
All right, absolutely. So first, for anyone who felt wronged by me or felt the hammer of the church coming down on, anybody who I've kicked out, I want to deeply, from the bottom of my heart, apologize. And if there's anything that I can do to talk to you, or if you want to talk to me, or if you want to just get together and chat any time, I would love that. I just feel bad about that. For the leaders in the church, I think that for the elders, I think they're in a state of denial about the issues in the church. I think that they try to paint the people who are speaking up online as the enemy. They've tried to paint them as to paint this just to brush all of this away as attack because they're transitioning to a new leadership team, right? So Gary and Dennis are retiring and the new leaders are taking over. So all of this is just satanic attack that's coming out. And I just want to challenge them to really listen to the people who are speaking, because these aren't people who hate you. They're hurt. They're absolutely hurt by you. But these are people who called Xenos home. I called Xenos home for 24 years, when the current elders, I was there when they were kids, when we were both all in the college group together. So I know who these people are. We're not your enemy. We're your sheep. The people out there who are hurt are your flock. They're your sheep, pastor. And they need to change their view. Jesus didn't beat up the sheep and leave them to die. He left the 99 sheep for the one sheep who had wandered away. And there's no empathy coming from this leadership. They are solely focused on maintaining the bureaucracy, maintaining the structure, maintaining Xenos, the organization. And they are not, they've lost what's important. They've lost the first love. They've lost Christ in that. And that's really what I want to leave them with. Yeah.
And it truly is a moment of decision to make, isn't it? For someone in upper level leadership of Xenos to hear. You got to make up your mind and choose which side of history, which side of the paradigm of right and wrong you want to be on. I certainly agree with you on that, at this point, they can rise up, become part of the solution or continue to remain part of the problem. One thing's for sure, we're not going away. We're going to do all we can to keep providing voices, or keep providing a platform for the voices of people that approach us. If there's people out there who would like to offer your own insights by way of interview, we'd love to hear from you. Please email us, contact us, talk to us. Let us know how we can do that. And we'd love to keep hearing from you. We already have, I know several other people just from Xenos who are still lined up waiting to be interviewed, and we're getting to you. Please be patient. We've had an awful lot of incredible insight and people just coming forward, offering to share their stories with us. And I'm so grateful that you are one of them, Steve. I'm thankful for the insight you provided us today, and look forward to having you back on the podcast again real soon. Thank you once again for being here, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Raphael. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks for listening today as we explored just where are we going. Our prayer is that you have been encouraged and strengthened, and if necessary, challenged in your daily journey through life. Jesus is coming. You can fall with the night, or you can rise with the sun. The choice is yours. You can email us with questions and comments at feedback@spiritwatch.org. And if you need urgent personal spiritual help, email us at help@spiritwatch.org. We look forward to hearing from you. Please follow our podcasting at our Facebook page and our website at spiritwatch.org. This podcast is a production of Spiritwatch Ministries, taking heed that no man deceives you.